And we have Mr. Groth here, and I see we have a number of members of the committee here with us. And this, I believe, was an opportunity for a discussion. Mr. Groth, did you want to begin?
Sure. As you said, we have several of the members of the School Adequate Public Facilities Committee with us today. Mm-hmm. This is an opportunity for us to brief the commissioners on our status, and I think the committee would like to come forward and also discuss with the commissioners.
Okay. Would you like to invite them forward and introduce them, or shall I?
Sure, we can do that.
Mm-hmm. We have Jennifer Abel and Ms. Pam Peterson from the Board of Education. And from the developer community, we have Mr. Meeker and Mr. Lorenzi. And I see one of the parents, Ms. Rose Mandaya, here. And so welcome. And thank you for coming this afternoon.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so the committee has been meeting for several months now. I'm just going to quickly state our charge in a brief summary. It's to evaluate the county's approach to ensuring adequate public facilities for schools in the development approval process to determine if the current policy is achieving its stated goals. The committee should also develop the solutions for addressing the timing of providing adequate public facilities to match planned growth in the county. And the committee should work with the designated staff to explore the feasibility and make the recommendations on the best method to work through the issues related to school redistricting, school capacity allocation, and the timing and methods of school funding and construction. The membership of the board as originally appointed was 2 members of the Board of Education, 2 members of the county commissioners, 3 citizen members, 2 of which are parents with children in the school system. The other is an independent citizen. And finally, we have 2 members of the Building Industry Association, building industry members, in an effort to sort of have a cross-section of parties that are intimately involved in these processes, as well as potentially affected by the decisions of policy. So with that, the committee is also staffed by both the Charles County Commissioner staff, such as myself, Mr. Mudd, who's also in the audience, Mr. Krebeck, as well as Mr. Barrett and Mr. Andritz from the Board of Education. And the Board of Education staff sends their regrets today as they're at a conference. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we wanted to cover briefly is that recently the board made an appointment for, the creation of the position for 2 members of the real estate community based on a letter that was submitted to the commissioners for consideration. That was moved and approved by the board. And recently we received an additional letter, the commissioners received an additional letter from the Educational Association of Charles County, or otherwise known as EACC, who has the next position on your agenda following our briefing here. The committee has essentially gone through an extensive educational process to date. We had a public forum to gather public input to make sure that those who didn't have membership on the committee could gather that information and digest it, ask questions, have a dialogue, and that was accomplished. Since that public forum, the committee has discussed many of those issues raised at length. And we've gone over numerous issues, such as the Board of Education's capital program for constructing new capacity, our adequate public facility process as it currently stands, its policy and everything that goes into it, enrollment trends and looking at projections for when new schools are needed, facility capacities in all of the schools have been briefly reviewed. A fair amount of time has been spent on school construction financing and how the DRRA funds have been used, how our bonds have been utilized, and our financing mechanisms have been balanced. The state process and everything that's required thereof, the Board of Education staff has reviewed, and some extensive effort has gone into that. We have still a long agenda ahead of us, a lot of territory to cover. the reason we're here today is not only brief you, but much of the membership of the committee wanted to have a quick dialogue with the commissioners based on the recent decision to add 2 new members, as well as the consideration of adding additional members, which is coming before you also. And so in order to do that, we wanted to get some time on your agenda, and here we are. The major concern, I think, is that considerable time and education has been spent to date on these issues that I just mentioned. It's taken considerable effort to get to that point, and the membership of the committee did express some concern with continuing to make progress given the legwork that we've done so far. So with that, with the membership that is with me, we have the portable microphone. If any comments you would like to share, pros or cons?
Can I also, do the commissioners have any questions before we go any further? Okay. And who's...
Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Pam Peterson, and I'm one of the committee members from the Board of Education. I want to stress that the committee has been working very well together. We have met a total of 6 times, and of those times, 1 was a public forum that was fairly well attended on April 10th at Thomas Stone High School. We feel that the sudden request for 2 new members could be very disruptive, and we did have at least 2 members of the committee that did not agree with that. But in general, those sitting at the table were of the opinion that our 6 meetings have been very informative, very educational, and are indeed just chock full of information. It would be very difficult at this time to catch someone else up. Now, Jason read for you exactly what our charge is, and timely is established in there, a timely discussion of how we come about with adequate public facilities, or in this case, schools. And it is my personal opinion that we need to keep working with the people that we have at the pace that has been set. Our meetings are to stretch through September, or a good portion of September. And at the rate we're going, I believe that without interruption, we can achieve the goals that have been set before us. I'll let somebody else talk now.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions with regard to...
I don't believe that was the purpose of this meeting.
I do believe that we're having a dialogue. Would you not like to ask any questions?
I believe Ken was before me.
I have a really simple question. How many members of the committee are there currently?
9, I believe. Yes, 9.
Plus staff assistants.
Plus staff assistants. Myself and Mr. Andritz were asked by the committee members to be co-facilitators, so while we're not members, we just help the meetings along.
So you have 11 people dealing with this on a regular basis?
Plus additional staff from both parties.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, we generally have 15 to 16 people around the table participating.
Commissioner Collins. Go ahead.
No, I had a question because obviously we take seriously, comments and requests made, but I want to understand how any additions would be disruptive. I mean, because up to this point, because I have attended the meetings, up to this point, it has been fact gathering. There hasn't been any initiation of any policy initiatives. Nothing has been put in place that could be codified as being actual results. And the 2 entities that are requesting, from my perspective, you could argue would actually bring something to the table to help continue the dialogue as it relates to school funding, and I'm referring to the SMAR representation as well as teachers. And again, from my perspective, this is a very public discussion, and I think any input from the public, particularly that input that would bring actual data that would assist us in making very sound decisions, I would think would be useful. But again, I want to understand the reasoning and the suggestion that somehow any additions would be disruptive.
Yes, we have done a lot of fact gathering, but it's been an education process. The last 6 meetings have taken a lot of time to get everyone up to the same speed as far as that education process, to get everyone to know what a DRRA is, what adequate public facilities is, where the money comes from, how the money is obtained, what is a transfer tax, how are schools built, what is the square footage of the schools, what are the guidelines, what are the rules, what do we have to adhere by, what are the laws, what is COMAR. I mean, all those things come into play, and bringing somebody else new into that, we'd have to start all over again educating a new person. Not that we're against it, it's we invite the public from these other entities in at different occasions to speak. For example, we had Mr. Renner come in from the St. Charles Companies to give a demonstration and speech about the St. Charles Companies in Docket 90. We have, if SMAR wants to come in and give fact-gathering information at a presentation, they are more than welcome to be put on the agenda for that. We also have the public forums where we allow that to happen. The EACC would be allowed to do that as well. I just think if you keep inviting these different entities, we could go on forever and we're never going to get anything done. As was stated in one of your previous sessions about the Planning Commission, you didn't want to keep adding new members once their process was already in place and they were started in that process, because you didn't want to disrupt it. And
but the mission of the Planning Commission is quite different than this board, where we're actually establishing from its very inception individuals that would be representative of the various entities and organizations within the county. And I guess, again, taking my thoughts further, from my perspective, I would think that the individuals that would perhaps be placed on the committee would be certainly familiar with the issues. And so, but a lot of your comments are based on the presumption that people will come to the table without any knowledge on the issues that we've expressly discussed during the course of these meetings. And so again, I can appreciate the fact that if we were asking people to come in and we've begun the process of implementation, and we've actually started, a rigorous discussion on the actual direction, I would certainly, view it from that perspective. But we're still in the fact-finding mode. And again, both of the entities that have requested an interest, have direct interest in the outcome. And from my perspective, I think that would be useful for the entire citizenry to have that type of robust discussion as part of the process.
With all due respect, I don't believe that a teacher is going to know that much about a DRA, and I don't believe that the real estate agents are going to know that much about building a school.
Well, I mean, that's a presumptive comment on your part. And,
it may be. But from inception would be the start of this committee, which was 12 weeks ago.
I would...
No, Ms. Martino, you will not. Please, we'll have order. Ms. Daya?
Yeah, I totally agree with the two school board members. In addition, I'd just like to say that if this was a concern, then it should have been established prior, because this board took forever to get established to begin with. My concern personally is also that then there should technically be 2 senior citizens on the committee. They don't have children in the schools. Do they need to pay taxes for schools to be built? Do we need to have? I mean, there's a slew of other people that need to be on there. Exactly. I just think that maybe what needs to just scrap the whole commission and start over. Then I think it's just, to me, I really feel that it's a mockery of the entire committee, that you're not going to put additional members in other committees.
But I wouldn't preclude the membership of any citizen or any citizen representation on a body that is certainly addressing a very critical issue as it relates to the county. And you know what? If senior citizens requested a seat at the table, I would be open to that idea as well.
That's my concern, because, I mean, I know, unfortunately, you have missed 2 meetings. There's a lot of information, and it's not that no one can catch up. It's just that when we are in the dialogue and we are talking about this, this, and this, and there are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 new members that have been appointed to this commission, we're just going to be talking about the same thing in the past and need to catch up. And I understand where Commissioner Davis has stated that, or that there needs to be someone from the real estate representing. We have someone. Her name is Glenda Harris. She can wear both hats, and she's done a phenomenal job. And unfortunately, she's not here, but I've spoken to her, and she's clearly stated at the last meeting she can wear both of those hats.
I'd like to speak, if I may.
Commissioner Davis?
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm sorry, were you going to ask a question, Commissioner?
Go ahead.
I'm really excited that you guys have gelled well, and that I recognize that you have a tough task in front of you. When Commissioner Kelly mentioned that we would have the group in, it wasn't, my impression was not that you were going to lobby one way or the other. It was that you were going to give us an update. So I think I'm a little just surprised, because ultimately it is a policy decision. I mean, the forming of the committee was a policy decision by the commissioners. So any additions will be a policy decisions based on that the commission will decide on. And I thought that we were just doing an update, is what I thought, and we would discuss it afterwards. But I'd like to hear more about what you've been doing, the progress that you've made, how long you think you may be. I mean, I'd like to hear more about that.
Well, I would just like to say that the committee did not address Commissioner Kelly to come speak on our behalf. We specifically asked Mr. Groth to relay that message, so I'm not sure where that confusion was.
That's not how you were put on the agenda for today. You were put on the
So
agenda.
can I ask you a question, Commissioner Davis? Was that put on the agenda? Because if I would have known prior that representatives were just going to be put onto our commission, then I would have been here speaking on behalf of that and stating that that would not be a good idea.
It's still a policy decision. And I would like to hear from Ms. Martino also. Thank you.
I will decide when we're going to hear from people, Commissioner Davis, and right now we're dealing with this group. Thank
right.
you.
You're welcome.
And I appreciate your cooperation. Okay. Mr. Meeker, I believe you're next.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm a little confused now about
So am I.
I apologize.
And you can feel free to talk about your experiences or your opinions, whatever you feel moved to, to do.
Well, to address Commissioner Davis's question more directly, as far as what we've accomplished, I think Mr. Peterson did a great job, along with Jason, in summarizing. It's been a very educational process, and I think that the group that's been assembled has worked well together. I'm not here to lobby one way or another whether 9 is the right number or 28 is the right number or 30 or but I can simply say that the group that's been put together is diverse and has worked well together so far. And certainly I have a vested interest in coming to consensus on solutions to this problem sooner rather than later, and I certainly hope that we can continue to work towards a expeditious resolution to this, hopefully by fall.
Thank you, Mr. Meeker. Mr. Lorenzi?
Yes, I guess I was a little confused also, but I thought we were going to do an update and I knew we were discussing this also. So,
and just so you know, we have an update in our board docs. So we have the benefit of Mr. Groth's summary statement in board docs. So we do have the update, and we're interested in hearing whatever you would like to add to that.
Well, I mean, to go on the additional member issue, I've been on a lot of these committees. especially at committees that dealt with this issue before, so maybe I'm not the right guy to ask this to, because I think I do know quite a bit about the subject. And I've been on a lot of committees, and people have dropped off, people have been added, so I'm not quite as concerned. I mean, I think we have a very detailed book here that they can learn from, and if they, I'm not sure they would hamper us that much in our efforts to try to come up with this solution on the time frames you're asking for, even though I do think it's going to be a large task to finish by then, because we still have a lot of information to go over and to learn, and then to go back and review what we have been given so far. There's a lot to review and try to piece it all together, and we do have a large task in front of us. And I think we also had decided at the last meeting that we were going to do some more public forums.
Yes.
So I think we're going to do every fourth meeting, so we should be close to scheduling another public forum also.
And if I recall, the committee's thought process was that that would give us an opportunity to hear from a variety of different groups, and that had special concerns or information, you know, that they wanted to spend some time briefing the committee on. And I do recall that there was also a sense that if we needed additional time, or if we were contacted by groups that felt we may have missed something, that we would be open to that as well. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, now, do you want to go through, Mr. Groth, would you like to go through the list in our board docs and just sort of, and then as you do that, if anybody wants to add anything, I think that might be a good way to proceed.
Sure, that's fine. Okay, so so far we've had a series of meetings, 6 in total. The first meeting was an introduction, very rudimentary. This is going to be our process. This is our goal. This is our schedule. And within, it's not included in your package, but within our binders, we have all of the dates of the meetings illustrated throughout the course of the summer and ending in roughly September. And then, of course, we'll add or subtract as needed. The second meeting really just covers the Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance, the Adequate Public Facilities Manual, the how-to and how we do it today. In other words, first have to understand the process that we go through to determine adequacy of facilities prior to deciding how to change anything as needed. Third was the public forum. We didn't want to go too long before we reached out to the public and got good input. We had a very diverse crowd there. We had everybody from parents to the realtor community, building industry members. St. Charles had representation there through Mr. Renner. Building industry folks were also there, and a series of interested citizens. I thought it was pretty well attended, for the subject matter. And then finally, following that, we followed up with a laundry list of issues that were brought up. We discussed those at length. We really tried to get to the bottom of people's concerns. What really is the root of these concerns? And so in moving forward and trying to come up with solutions to certain issues, we were able to discuss those at length. We recently went over our format for issues identification. Essentially, we're gearing up to come up with those solutions. What is that strategy? What are the things that we're going to do to tackle this? So staff got together to come up with a format that everybody could agree on. And one of the main things was, let's all agree that there's a problem here. Because obviously, we're never going to agree on everything, but if we can agree on the issue first at hand, then we can move forward with potential solutions to attack those, and then come to a consensus on what the recommendation is. And then most recently, our May 15th meeting, the Board of Education staff reviewed their capital program, which is extremely complex. There must have been, I'd say 30 to 40 pages worth of material that was covered in that meeting, because it is a lot of information that goes into that process. Okay, so plan work for the future. Our next meeting is June 5th, and we are meeting every other Wednesday throughout the course of the summer. So it's a fairly grueling schedule for this type of information and the amount of information coming. And we're getting ready to present what other jurisdictions do. How do they handle their APFO? APFO is not unique to Charles County. This is a nationwide thing, and it's very specific in the land use article, what used to be known as Article 66B, for jurisdictions within Maryland. So we've actually almost completed that effort, at least on the level at which we want to present it. The devil's in the details, really. One jurisdiction may seem like they've got it made and they've got it nailed, but it might be a completely different animal. So we're getting ready to tackle that. And without going into too much gory detail, I'll just say that we're going to first cover these policy issues. How do you move forward in determining when you need a school, and how do you manage development capacity to get there? And then the other animal is, how do you fund them? How do you adequately fund the schools? And we have our fiscal services department intimately involved in that. As well as we expect in working with the Board of Education staff, they have coordinated with their fiscal people to have them in as well and talk about how it works on their end, because it's not all one-sided. So that's a really basic synopsis of where this has come. Just to clarify a few things, the committee had asked that they be able to have a dialogue with the commissioners. I had an agenda request ready and ready to go. The commission came up, the request by the EACC had come up, and the discussion was amongst the commissioners recently. There was a motion made to have this meeting. So the clarity and intent and content of the meeting, I apologize for any confusion, but I think...
Jason, there's no need for apology. I think we all understood.
Well, I'm glad that the discussion's been had, and I'm glad we were able to brief everyone on where we've been.
Thanks for pointing out what happened, Jason.
Sure, I do apologize for any confusion.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. Would you mind also adding, or maybe someone else on the committee would like to speak a little bit to the work that you've done with regard to the geographic areas, focusing, trying to calculate how development is happening and how we can better pinpoint where we're going to need the schools. And I think that was really an important discussion that this group worked on, and that that accomplishment is really sort of pointing us in the right direction as you continue with Mr. Andritz on your research.
Yes, and Mr. Andritz and the Board of Education staff is working very closely with our group to look at where is development occurring, first and foremost. Obviously, while we have zoning and we have land use maps and that sort of thing, we can't dictate where growth and development is going to occur from year to year. So we're looking at the actual physical geography of where growth and development is occurring, the schools that are serving those areas, what their capacity issues are, and then an additional request that came out of the committee members is what is the yield factor for different areas. And when I say yield factor, what I mean is how many students are generated by a particular type of home, and do they differ in different geographic areas? In other words, in the more rural areas, are there more or less student generation coming out of, say, a single-family home? And then we're also going to look at housing types to see if we're using accurate numbers with regard to how many students are coming out of an apartment complex or a townhouse community or a single-family home community. And then more so on the differences of single-family homes, is it based on geographic area? Is it based on the square footage of the home? Obviously, we can't analyze every household in the county, but what we are doing is taking a sampling, and in the last meeting we met with the committee to gather input on what schools we should use, what are good examples of rural schools that have a growing community, what are examples of sort of an established community school, and what are good schools in the more suburban or urban areas of the county to use as a test. And so we all decided what those were. That exercise is going to be taking place over the next month, and we hope to come back to the committee in July with some hard facts to consider and see whether or not any changes need to be made, either to the student generation factors, but it also gives input as to where new schools need to be and where that student generation is drawing from.
Thank you.
I would
Ms.
add
Peterson?
to that in our last staff discussion, we also brought forward information on our schools, the ages of them, and how we determine when they need renovated or when they need extra work. So that also has come into play in our discussion, and that there is quite a lot of concern about the yield factor, and that we are working very hard on 7 different elementary school areas from different parts of the county, and how the mobility of the community, as well as whether or not a community ages out. There are communities in our Waldorf area that are so mobile that we have new young families moving in all the time. And the schools in those areas stay pretty full. And therefore, if we're using a county average, are we truly capturing what the true issues are? So those are the types of things that we put our heads together on, and I'm confident that we'll get there. We have a great set of staff who are working well together.
And if I could just add, and Mr. Meeker and Mr. Lorenzi, from their point of, or your perspective, you've really talked a lot about the need to have this information or these standards in place well before you get started, as something that you recognize was really important, and that we've sort of learned hasn't been happening, and something that we likely can take care of as we move through this process. Mr. Meeker, I think that was something, when we talked about how by the time you get to the DRA process, you're so far along.
Well, it goes back to having predictability in the development process, whether it's, for a project, in the rural area or a project in the development district, but having a known set of rules and a known time frame that you can move forward through the process is invaluable.
Okay, thank you. And I think, Ms. Dyer, you talked a good bit about the relocating of your family, the redistricting. You take kids out of one school, move them to another, and then the other school's overcrowded, which kind of gave us the full circle back to the importance of the geographic piece here, targeting your students where there's just your schools where the students are.
That's correct. I think that's the biggest thing I think we've all learned is we know where the growth is, and that's pretty much in the Waldorf Development District, and I think that's where the moving back and forth, trying to figure all that out right now.
And just to close sort of out, Ms. Abel, really, could you just, I know Mr. Andrus isn't here, but could you just sort of speak to the time frame and the length of time it takes to get a school going, as well as the necessity at this point in time to find land? Because I think that was a big issue for us as well, is that finding land in the areas where we need the schools.
Don't know if I'm the one that should be speaking on it. Maybe Jason would be better off speaking on this. I'll let Jason address that. But finding the land in the districts that we need them is one of the biggest issues that we have. I'll let Jason address those.
Essentially, my understanding from the Board of Education staff is it's roughly a 5 to 10 year process. By the time you find land, get it into the situation you need it to be. In other words, water and sewer is brought to the site, stormwater management, grading the site, and then going through all of the various levels of approval with the State Board of Education, because they need to be involved at every step of the way. Even if they're not fully funding or funding it at all, it still ends up being a state jurisdictional facility to a degree, and so they need input and approval at all those levels. And hitting all of those milestones, getting the funding in place, getting the school constructed and open to students is a considerable time factor.
So, and Commissioner Collins?
No, I just wanted to make the point before we closed out that, and Ms. Peterson, she made reference to it. The presentations by staff, and that includes Mr. Andrus, representing the Board of Education, Mr. Groth, and Mr. Mudd, have been exemplary, and that's one thing that I think all of us can agree on. We've been provided tremendous information to put us in a position to make sound decisions for our citizens. And so, Mr. Groth, you've done an outstanding job up to this point, leading us in.
I'll mind my P's and Q's, sir. Thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions or comments?
I got one question. As the board talked about price of a high school, are we in line with every county in Maryland? Like, are we building bigger schools, or can we build 2 schools for the price of 1? Did anybody talk about I don't even know what a price of school costs in Maryland.
School funding has certainly been discussed on the surface level as a topic for the future. We will, in a future agenda, we'll probably dig into what goes into a school and what it costs to build a school in Charles County.
And we did talk about, if you wouldn't mind, Ms. Peterson, prototype schools.
We did talk about prototype schools, particularly at the elementary school level. We have based the cost of the schools on cost per square foot per county and per the wealth of the county, because the state does pay for a portion of our schools, but it pays for brick and mortar only. And at this point, with the wealth of Charles County being decided by the state, we pay 67%, or they pay 67% of bricks and mortar only. So that would mean that they would fund that much of the bare bones building, not what goes into the building. So those are the types of ways in which we've discussed it. But because a high school is not our immediate next need, we've been focusing more on elementary schools.
And what I was getting at is, could we build 2 schools for the price of 1? That's where I was trying to get at.
Well, those things are highly determined by the IAC, and we must meet their qualifications. And so we need to think very seriously about the fact that these buildings need to last between 50 and 100 years. And I am very cautious. I came to the county in 1996 at a time when Mattawoman was exactly 2 years old. And as a volunteer in the building, I can tell you that it was leaking every time it rained. And if you were here, and I'm pretty sure you were at that time, there were a lot of newspaper articles. That school was rushed by the previous superintendent, and the efforts to get things done quickly created a nightmare that I can tell you many of the county commissioners at the time would never want to have happen again. And so I caution that we go back and learn from the mistakes of the past. Now, I want to reiterate that there is nothing wrong with Mattawoman now. There was a lawsuit. The company that made the error had to come and repair it. The walls and ceilings were sealed, and the problem with split cinder block was fixed. But those are problems that I caution you we never want to have again. And as a board, we take that very seriously. So while I am encouraged that there are some things that we could do to reduce costs, I ask that we be very cautious about rushing things and making errors.
Commissioner Robinson?
Costs a lot to build schools, costs more to operate them.
It does indeed, sir.
And that's something that we need to take into account. We're certainly dealing with it firsthand with St. Charles High School. So it is, it's a very long, drawn-out approach. It's more than just finding the land and doing the bricks and mortar. Mm-hmm. And I agree with you, Ms. Peterson. If we're going to do it, we need to continue to do it right.
Well, I thank you very much. As a member of the committee, I can say that the work has gone very well. I think we have a good group. I do believe that we are really getting into the meat of these issues now, and by really identifying this geographic piece of this and getting this data, I think we're going to make even more progress and get closer to being able to really talk about some of the most important issues. Just from my vantage point, I do see that as we determine where we, how we're proceeding, we're going to find that we have to take steps to, get to a baseline and then equitably go from there in terms of how we distribute the cost associated with the construction of schools and even including in that some piece of the new operations. And then I just feel that as a committee member, I do want to add that I do believe that it would be disruptive at this point in time to make changes, and I ask my colleagues to keep that in mind. I think that to make changes right now would be certainly disrespectful to the folks that have worked so hard. It is a policy decision, I understand that, but just like all decisions, it's important that we show respect for our volunteers. And so that would be my position. Certainly no disrespect to SMAR members or to teachers. I just think that we've really come together as a group. We see the strengths, we see the importance of having the development community there, the parents there, and the Board of Ed there, and the staff, as Commissioner Collins has pointed out, has been fabulous. And so I'd like to see that synergy continue without the group dynamics changing right now. So with that,
I think I had a request to hear from Ms. Martino.
well, I don't know that I'm interested in hearing right now. I'd like to finish with this. Is there anything else that you'd like to say?
I would only add that I really do believe that the open forums that we have brought up some very good comments and questions. I have worked very hard at answering some of the questions that have come through my email site, my board site. Jason and staff members have done an excellent job of listing the issues by all of the people who came to our first open forum. They have been considered, they have been determined to be factual or not, and then they have been added to our list, and they are reviewed each meeting. So I really feel like any member of the community has ample opportunity not only to be heard, but to have their questions answered. And I personally am working very hard at that. I think that there have been times when I've been surprised at some of the information that is floating around out there that has not been accurate. But nonetheless, we need to know that too so that we can get that corrected.
Okay, thank you. And thank you all very much. Ms. Dye?
I'm not sure if the commissioners realized that when they established this committee, they did a phenomenal job in one thing, and that was to bring the open communication between the commissioners and the Board of Ed and the public. It's the first time that I've actually heard parents come to me and say, oh my God, I never knew that. We never were able to have open dialogue between the Board of Ed and the parents. And I think the open forum has given that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we thank you very much, and hopefully we can do this again when you get to another good stopping point to come back and report. I do not intend to call on Ms. Martinez. You tell her. Okay.
She's a citizen and she wants to speak.
Next on our
any indication of how the board is going to be when they won't let somebody who wants to speak.
You are out of order.
I know I'm out of order, but you are too, because I've asked you twice.
And there's no reason whatsoever.
Can we ask the board whether they'd like to hear from someone else?
Commissioner Davis, you are out of order.
Are you?
Next on our agenda is new business. Okay.
I feel sorry for the board, for the group.
Okay. Commissioners, is there any new business? And I do see that we have Dr. Abney. If you'd like to come up, Dr.